Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast. My name is Jill Foose. I'm a functional medicine and integrative nutrition health coach. I created this podcast to bring you along as we travel down intriguing, science packed roads, debunking old medical paradigms and perusing new innovative therapies and modalities with the finest functional medicine doctors, practitioners, and like minded biohackers while living our best life. Enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Trip Podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that doesn't get enough airtime, understanding premenopause and how to prepare for perimenopause and menopause long before they start. So if you have a daughter or a niece or a friend who has a daughter or a niece who is in that age group, please share this episode with her. So if you're in your 20s, 30s, or early 40s, this episode is especially for you because here's the thing. Menopause isn't something that just shows up one day. Your body lays the groundwork years in advance, and that early phase, premenopause, is when small shifts begin, and recognizing them can help you stay ahead of the curve. So we're going to break down what premenopause really is and why younger women should care. Lifestyle interventions, of course, that support your hormones, your mood, and your energy as you age. What to expect as you move into perimenopause and menopause, from common symptoms to silent changes happening inside your body, and also how to advocate for yourself with your doctor, what questions to ask, and how to get the support you need. And finally, how to set up your health now, today, for better longevity tomorrow. Brain clarity, muscle strength, and resilience post-menopause all matter. You'll walk away from this episode with practical tools, a better understanding of your body, and a game plan, not just to get through menopause, but to thrive beyond it. My guest today is Dr. Alicia Robbins. She is a board-certified OBGYN, diplomat of the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine, which I love, and a certified menopause practitioner. She completed all her medical training and was a former faculty member at the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. And she's the founder of The Elm, a women's health practice which specializes in gynecology, hormones, perimenopause, menopause, sexual health, longevity, and lifestyle medication. She's been featured in Allure Magazine, Elle Magazine, the New York Times, National Geographic, Parent Magazine, ABC News, and more. And she is launching her own podcast called Call Your Doctor in the fall of 2025. So just a short medical disclaimer before we dive in with her. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice or to make any lifestyle changes to treat any medical condition in yourself or others. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. And this entire disclaimer also applies to any of my guests on my podcast. So let's sit back, open your mind, and let's dive into premenopause for younger women. Hey, Dr. Robbins, welcome to the Health Trip Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much, Jill, for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here, and I love the topic.
Yeah, this is a great topic. My goal for this conversation is to help the younger generation really start to roadmap their road to the menopause transition. And for women like me, I have a 28-year-old daughter. I have 4 boys and a girl. And,
Oh, wow.
and I really try to keep her up to date with so many things. She knows a lot about my health journey. My mom's still alive, and we're going to get into family history, but it's just such an important conversation to have, especially if there's people in your family that you can talk to about their experiences too. So that's my goal. A lot of the listeners have daughters, they have nieces, they have granddaughters. And so I thought premenopause was an excellent topic to talk about. And so let's just start with that. What
Yeah,
is
because
premenopause?
so premenopause just means you're before menopause, and that can literally be from the time you're born to menopause, your premenopause, essentially. So, um, it is your entire life prior to menopause, essentially. But I like this because I feel that so many times when you ask someone, how did your mom go through menopause? Everyone says, nobody talked about it. Nobody told me. My mom didn't talk to me about what menopause was like. So I feel like our generation of women are determined to change that for the younger generation of women. We want to be more open. We want to educate them so they know kind of what's down the road. And so I love that you're focusing on the premenopausal younger generation of girls. And actually, I have found that a lot of them are interested in this topic more than I would
Mhm.
expect. So, of course, there has always been this stigma with like, oh, menopause, it's so far away, perimenopause is so far away, whatever. But when I did a panel in New York City, and um, it was this, so dermatologist Dr. Barbara Sturm, and she had all this, there was all these
Mhm.
20 super stylish, cool 20-year-olds from London who were part of her team. And they were like, we're so excited to hear about perimenopause. And I was like, really? And they're like, yes, this is so important for us. We want to know how to set ourselves up for. So I just thought, wow, that's so cool. I think the younger generation, they're smart. They're a smart generation, and they want to really invest in their health. So it's great.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm 57 now, so I've been postmenopause for quite a while. And if I could go back to my 30s, in that perimenopausal, like the premenopause up to that perimenopause, I was having kids too. So I wasn't really tuned into all these changes that were going on in my own physical world. And it was really hard for me to decipher what was just stress from raising kids and having babies and coming off that to what was changing in my hormonal situation.
Yes.
And my mom didn't talk to me about it. And I wish I would have known back then because it really would have helped a lot of things, including I'm divorced, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
I have done this, I've been podcasting for 4 seasons now, and
Oh,
quite
wow.
often we have talked about the divorce rate in midlife that happens because women are just feeling like such a train wreck.
Totally. It's not a coincidence. Absolutely. For so many reasons, I think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. So yeah, it's great to start this conversation earlier.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's happening in hormonally in a woman who's in her mid to upper 20s and then early 30s before that
Mhm.
perimenopause.
Yeah.
Young women are taking oral birth control,
Mhm.
or they might be have a ring. And
Mhm.
so, or some are not on anything, but what's
Yeah.
going on?
Okay. So let's assume that we have someone let's just start with the normal
Yeah.
situation, which is basically a young girl. Let's say she's 24, she has regular periods. So every month, she has basically, we kind of start day one with um, the first day of your period, and your estrogen is starting to rise. You have follicle stimulating hormones secreting, sending a message to the follicles to secrete estrogen, and estrogen is rising. And you basically sort of have the first 2 weeks, which we call the follicular stage, which is when there's a dominant follicle that is growing. And then mid-cycle is when ovulation happens. And then the second part of the period is the luteal phase. And that's sort of, when people tend to sometimes feel a little bit more tired. That's when our progesterone peaks. That's sort of when, if obviously if there's no pregnancy, then your period comes back and you have that full cycle. But if a woman is not if she's if she's getting a period regularly, then she's ovulating regularly. And so that's sort of like standard, the sort of standard, basically, like hormone, your estrogen is sort of going up. It dips a little bit around ovulation, it goes up, and then it drops right before your period. Progesterone is pretty low and then peaks kind of mid luteal phase. And, it really does depend. Let's say she's not on, we're assuming she's not on any birth control or hormone therapy at this point. um, Women experience this cycle very differently. And part of that is that these hormones really are involved in the brain a lot. When this estrogen drops, some women can feel really bad migraines because of that hormonal drop, and some women don't. And it really just comes down to genetics and sort of where the distribution of these receptors are in your brain and around your body, what your symptoms feel. And then we have sort of other situations, I think that maybe two of the more common ones that we hear about are endometriosis and PCOS. And this is when we have abnormalities in the period, where periods can be, with endometriosis, really, really heavy, painful. A lot of women, they don't know that it doesn't need to, like, if your period is keeping you at home or from work because you can't function, that is definitely a sign that something needs to be
Mm,
evaluated and that it's off. Like, you shouldn't have to be at home with a heating pad, ibuprofen around the clock, and curled up in a ball from pain. And if that's been your experience with your period your whole life, then that is that they a lot of women don't realize that that's not normal. So that's one thing, is like recognizing really painful, heavy periods um, that are affecting your ability to function is just a good test of figuring out if it's inhibiting you from doing the things you need to or you want to do. Then that's something that should probably be evaluated. Um, and then we have sort of PCOS, which basically is when women have a little bit of it. Hormonal imbalance isn't actually a medical term, but what ends
right.
up happening is that you basically have elevated androgens. So you have these elevated sort of DHEA, or total testosterone, which can lead to side effects with like acne and some dark hair, but irregular periods. And generally, they have more estrogen than progesterone. So there's some, I know it's not, I'm going to say hormonal imbalance just because I know a lot of young women
Right.
use that term, and it kind of is, even though it's not an official medical term. It kind of is. A hormonal imbalance, so to speak. And a lot of these girls, and I think we'll get to talk about this later, but have tend not all of them, but a lot of them have some level of insulin resistance. So the hormones are all connected, and so they have a hard time losing weight. They gain weight really easily, and I have a lot of empathy for these young ladies, because it's for these women, they try so hard to eat the right things and they can't lose any weight, and they see their friend eating whatever they want. And so that's, one hormonal situation that can happen very commonly in your 20s. And then I would say the third one, I just thought of the third one too, is just with it is great, obviously, to exercise and be active for sure as early as possible. But sometimes when we take it too far, or in the situation of extreme professional athletes, women can lose their period and
Hmm.
sort of not have a normal period. Their estrogens and everything is just low. FSH is low, estradiol's low, everything's low. And so they're just kind of really just over exercising, under eating, and they won't have a period. So those are some of the three more commonly, like, um, um, period issues that I feel
Abnormal.
like I see, abnormal period issues
Hmm.
that I see
Hmm.
in my 20s. And then I don't want to keep talking too much, but if you want to talk about what their natural hormones are doing on a birth control pill, we can talk about that too.
Yeah, I do. I want to talk about young women who are taking birth control and how that
Yeah.
suppresses their
Yeah.
body's ability to produce these hormones, and how
Yeah.
is that affecting them, and how
Yeah.
all of this is going to then transpire as they move through this phase and towards perimenopause.
Yeah. So a lot of women are on birth control for years. I was probably on it for 10 or 15 years. And so when you take, it's important to know, because a lot of people don't realize that the hormones that we tend to use for sort of the 40 and plus age group are very different than the hormones
Hmm.
in the birth control pill. And everyone kind of like lumps them all together. Even other doctors and clinicians, they're like, oh, hormones, birth, like they sort of, whatever is true for birth control, they sort of apply to hormone therapy and vice, and it's not true. So it's very important to distinguish that a birth control pill has, most of them have two components: ethinyl estradiol, which is a synthetic estrogen, and some type of progestin, which is always a synthetic. Progestin is the name we use for synthetic progesterones, basically. So when a woman takes these exogenous hormones, it basically sends a message to her ovaries to stop secreting. So I guess I should take a step back for young ladies listening to this. Your ovaries are the primary source of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. We have testosterone in as women, and it actually peaks in our 20s. And so when you take a pill, it suppresses your ovaries, sort of quiet down, I suppose, or you just
Hmm.
really suppress the secretion of your natural hormones. And there's good and bad with that. I mean, it's good in some sense that I mean, the prime you for a lot of women, they're taking it for birth control, and in some ways it does help. It can help with heavy periods because sometimes you're basically have lower levels of estrogen that are stimulating the lining than what your natural hormones are. And but it doesn't quite do what your natural estrogen does for in other ways that people don't think about. So we sort of always focus on the period, which is of course important,
Hmm.
but there's all these other things like bone health, so the ethanol in the birth control pill, it helps a little bit for bone health, but it doesn't help as much as your natural estrogen. Um, Cardiovascular health, it does not appear to be as helpful for cardiovascular health as your natural estrogen. Um, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm not like super pro or super against the birth control pill. I think there's a role for it, and I was on it and I would still do it again as my option because I felt good on it. But it's also these hormones are in your brain too. And so for some women, those hormones, they don't feel great emotionally. Like putting them on the pill makes them have worse PMS or PMDD. And so there are some type you can try to do it continuously. But I usually tell patients if you don't feel good on a pill, there's usually other solutions we can figure out. You don't have to feel like if you don't feel great on it, it's probably a sign that you should try something else and you don't need to suffer through that. And because mood's so important. And so that basically the synthetic estrogen doesn't like attach to the receptors in the brain as much as the natural beta estradiol. And so it is complex. I think we are still trying to elucidate the different things that these hormones do in the brain. Um, and a lot of it is just sort of seeing how someone feels on it. But it does suppress your natural secretion of these hormones, which are important for your long-term health. And the ethanol, and the bottom line is the birth control pill helps with some of those things, and maybe not with others in terms of your long-term health. Oh, and
And
so
so,
sorry, and I didn't realize I didn't even answer your question in terms of what happens to
mhm,
perimenopause. So what happens is basically for some women it works out really well because they do not feel great so basically in perimenopause, in your 40s, your estrogen and is up and down. The fluctuations are greater, but it's overall going down as you go through years of perimenopause like this. For some women, these big jumps up and down really does not they don't feel great. They have more mood issues, they have
mhm,
more night sweats. They don't feel great. So for some, putting them on a birth control pill can help and they feel better on a birth control pill. But I would say in my experience that's a minority of patients. So what I generally do if someone's on a pill and they're like in their late 30s or 40s and they feel good, I'll have them continue. But at a certain point, usually at a certain point someone on a birth control pill in their 40s will say like I'm starting to have night sweats even being on the pill, or I'm starting to have more anxiety and more mood. Being on the long-term pill can often actually cause vaginal dryness and issues with
mhm,
libido. So, if someone's coming to me and saying like, I don't have as much libido, and I've even had and even energy and fatigue, because for some women, their natural estrogen helps them with like energy and feeling sort of just more pep in their step. And so for some women, they feel really fatigued on a birth control pill, or they just have low libido because the birth control pill does lower your total testosterone.
mhm.
So, depending on the goals, it's different for everyone. Like, do you need birth control right now? Is libido something you want to work on? You have to sort of take into account all their goals and then prioritize what makes most sense in that scenario. But it definitely has, I'd say it can help for some women, but for others, their symptoms can break through that birth control pill, and that's when we start talking about, do we transition you? Or for some, they're just like, I just want to get off of it and try hormone therapy, and we do that as well. That's possible too.
Yeah, for the younger woman listening, and she's successful at taking oral birth control, and she plans on staying on it through, she'll go on and off it, maybe she's in a marriage and she's having children.
Mhm,
Maybe she goes back on it and she's in her 40s now.
mhm, mhm.
And you said at some point you might switch over if there's breakthrough symptoms.
Yep.
Can you be on oral birth control or an IUD and in conjunction start taking menopause hormone
That's
therapy
such
if
a good
needed?
question because we never clarify this. So, no and yes. So, no, you can't be on a birth control pill and hormone therapy because those different estrogens, the ethinyl estradiol and the beta estradiol, fight for the same places in your brain and around your body.
Mm,
So, they kind of compete with each other. So, you can't be on that. But you can do an IUD and hormone therapy. And that tends to be a really nice combo for women in their 40s because a lot of them end up a lot of them in their early 40s need birth control, and a lot of them start having really heavy periods as these hormonal fluctuations start getting more um, extreme, I guess. And so that you can have really heavy periods with clots. And so the IUD is great because for three reasons, really. One is it with consistent use, at least after 3 months, it helps thin out that lining, which can become thick after with these crazy estradiol fluctuations
mhm,
that are happening. So it helps improve the volume of blood in heavy periods. It provides birth control, of course, and contraception. And it also can be done in conjunction with hormone therapy. So it's all local. It doesn't interfere. It doesn't suppress ovulation. Which again, for some women, they feel better if their hormones are suppressed while they're in this big sort of this perimenopause phase where these hormones are up and down. But not all women. Like I have many women who feel great on a birth control pill and perimenopause. Not many. I have like I would say a minority of my patients feel good in perimenopause and a birth control pill, but the majority feel better on hormone therapy. And I think that's just because the way I explain it is those natural hormones do a lot in their brain. I mean, that's what your brain is sort of like searching for, kind of, or what it was, it
mhm.
was meant to have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's such a nuanced conversation, and there is no one size fits all approach to
It
this.
really isn't. That's why I know it really isn't. And the more I do it, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many variables that we can
Mhm,
consider. So yeah, it is a lot to consider and think about. But it's the exciting thing is we're dedicating more research dollars finally to women's health. I mean, certainly
mhm.
not enough and we have so much catching up to do, but I do think there seems to be more of a focus on women's health now than certainly like 5 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. And this is why I wanted to do this specific episode topic because I want younger women to understand that if something didn't work for your friend or something did
Yes,
work for your friend, doesn't mean it's your equation. And so you have to,
absolutely.
and we'll talk later about building your healthcare team, but that's why this conversation is so important. Circling back to our moms and our grandmoms, not really talking to us about their menopause journey. What if if a young woman listening has the opportunity, meaning her mom is still alive, her grandmother, maybe her great aunts or her aunts are alive, someone's around,
Yes.
what are some questions that she should be asking? And how
Yes.
relevant is that to her future journey?
That's great. Yes. So, yes, so there is a genetic component as to when you go through menopause. So, finding out if they're how, if they went through it earlier, if they went through it later, if they're for some women their transition is not so bad. How was it? How were their symptoms? So getting as much information as to how they experienced it and specifically like the age they experienced it and what the symptoms were because sometimes, for example, ethnicity and genes definitely come into play. African American women tend to have more severe and greater duration of night sweats and hot flashes. And it's important to find that out because a night sweat and a hot flash is not just a hot flash. It actually can increase your risk of cardiovascular disease because every time you have a hot flash, your blood pressure goes up, your cortisol goes up, your heart rate goes up. So if you think about that, if that's happening over and over again, it actually is one of the reasons why they're linked and why African American women have more cardiovascular risk with menopause. So that's key. Um, Asian women tend to have more like the bone issues, more joint pain, osteoporosis, osteopenia. So
Mhm.
knowing if I think age of menopause, whether or not their moms or grandmothers had osteoporosis is huge. I'm so into preventing this because we've been doing it all wrong because we've been screening women at 65, which is the standard of care,
Right.
which is absurd. And now I've been a lot more proactive about it. So I send bone densities on anyone 40 and above and if maybe even younger if they have risk factors. And I've been so surprised how much osteopenia I'm finding. And this is something totally preventable. And genetics is a big component. So knowing that your mom has osteopenia or that your grandmother had osteoporosis might mean the difference between starting more resistance training earlier,
Hmm.
or focusing on calcium and getting your vitamin D up, or walking with a weighted vest in your 30s, which, by the way, there's not as much of a stigma with anymore. Like I went to I went to go get my nails done yesterday, and this girl was like, "Oh yeah, I saw your post on Instagram. I started wearing a weighted vest, and I was asking my mom about osteopenia. I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" And
Hmm.
these young girls, they're getting on it. Like they're really attuned to what's going on, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, my daughter bought one and I see she walks her dog with
That's
hers on.
amazing. Yeah.
However, the science on that is really kind of mixed. Have you been finding this online? A lot of the researchers are saying there's maybe just like one study where it showed maybe there was a benefit to wearing a weighted vest and mitigating the progression of osteoporosis, and that it's just kind of been blown out of
I feel
proportion.
like the data is pretty strong because also we know that women that have larger BMIs, I mean,
Mhm.
whether it's a weighted vest or that's part of why resistance training helps too, is just
Yeah.
because when you lift and puts pressure on I mean, of course, building muscle is helpful and prevents falls and is not, but there is this physiology where you put like more strain on your bones and it
Hmm.
forces it to
Hmm.
sort of regenerate and regrow, like slow down the resorption and breaking down of your bones. Um, Also, like women that have larger BMIs tend to have less osteoporosis because of that weight that's sort of.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked at the studies in a while, but there are pretty like general consensus as far as on this.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, if you're seeing, I mean, I think I will say I'd have to look at the study. There's so many studies, the quality of study really matters. And certainly wearing it more will be more beneficial if they were wearing it in the study only. It depends on the weight they're using and how often they're using it. So,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to dig into that because I love it. But I haven't seen honestly any controversy on that personally. But I'm also like really targeted for
Uh-huh. Yeah.
these things.
I'll send some information to
Yeah.
you later, but it's really, but the conversation is still so interesting, right? My mom has osteoporosis. She has shrunk so much. She's like so little I can like put her in my pocket and
Mhm.
take her
Yeah.
wherever I go.
Right.
I have osteoporosis. I was diagnosed with it last year.
Oh,
So
right, I saw that, yeah.
so I'm really glad that I have a weighted vest. I walk on the treadmill with it and I hold a weight in one hand and then I
Yeah,
switch back and forth.
yeah,
Helps me with my balance and
yeah,
impact.
that's great.
So it's not going to hurt me. I'm not
Yeah,
wearing so much weight where it's hurting me.
right, no, and you
Um,
don't wanna hurt don't wanna cause injuries certainly with it, yeah.
yeah. So if my mom has osteoporosis, I have osteoporosis, and I've been living a very healthy lifestyle
Yeah.
for 40
Oh,
plus years. So the
yeah,
genetics play a massive
huge,
role here.
massive role, yep.
So, having my daughter, see this and start to take matters into her own hands. And she's a Pilates instructor. She does weight training and now
Oh,
she's
great.
walking with a weighted vest. We're going to talk about those pillars of health, including movement, that are really important to this equation as young women transition into perimenopause.
Mhm.
So, any other questions that you think the younger women should be asking their moms? Like, should they be asking about their libido, their sex drive? Does that
I
matter?
that's interesting. I would say, like, there's not a genetic component to that as far as I'm aware.
Right.
We tend to describe it as the biopsychosocial model, meaning, there's the biological part of it, which is related to hormones and your estrogen and testosterone levels mostly. And then the way our upbringing. So I guess in that sense, perhaps the way your mom talked about sex or
Mhm.
talks make it how
Or
open
didn't?
or didn't exactly. I guess no, I guess what I would say is important is knowing that it is influenced by biology, psychology, and your social surroundings and
Yeah.
how you were raised, religion, sort of, your mom's um, opinion on these things. And so that certainly that certainly impacts it. But like a genetic component to the actual
Right.
biological, I don't think is there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it certainly
Um,
helps. I mean, I think getting to know your family history is so important. And I would probably also add, cardiovascular disease, which is the number one killer of women, is it's important to know that because that also has a huge genetic component. Lifestyle is important, but family's genetic, your genetics definitely play a huge role with that.
yeah. And I would add to that dementia and
Oh yeah,
Alzheimer's as
I
well.
agree. I
Yeah.
agree
Yeah.
because another one, and look, the cool thing about if there is a cool thing about cardiovascular disease or neurocognitive disorders like dementia and Alzheimer's is they're very heavily influenced by lifestyle. I mean, I know I just said
Mhm.
cardiovascular disease has a huge genetic point, but they are, influenced by diet and lifestyle, both of them, especially neurocognitive disorders. Like you can really influence the way your genes are expressed by your lifestyle, which is so cool because it's very empowering. I hope that if women take away anything from this, young women, that it's not that they realize that it is good to know family history and their genetics, but your lifestyle and is really so powerful.
Absolutely. And what are people doing in their 20s if they're not married and having babies? They're out partying, right? They have multiple partners, they're out drinking, they're out staying up too late on the weekends. They're going hard
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's the population that if you can go hard, that's when you should go hard.
yeah, yeah.
But I know more and more young people are stopping that type of behavior and really turning to a much healthier lifestyle. They're seeing the
Yes,
value in energy and building lean muscle
yes,
mass. So, there's just more information out there with the help of social media. Social media
yes.
isn't all that bad.
Right. And, there is a trend of like decrease alcohol intake. Like when I was in
Yeah.
college, everyone just binge drank. That was just how it was. I mean,
Yep.
including me, unfortunately. But the only thing is because I was all excited about this, I was talking about it with someone. I was like, oh, it's so cool. Like I went to there was some event and it was a they had mocktails or whatever, non-alcohol. But everyone, I mean, I'm sort of like, I'm used to that from my age events. But when I go to like 20 something year olds, I was like, wait, I'm surprised you guys aren't serving alcohol. I'm like, no, it's like a thing. We don't like, they're not into it. But I do think this generation has to be cautious with the vaping and
Yep.
like the other stuff. So
Yep.
that's
Chronic disease states start in your 20s.
yeah,
The
yeah.
combination of your genetics and your lifestyle. Um, Pivoting to hormonal testing or just labs in general for this premenopausal young woman, what's important to get?
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of them can be iron deficiency with their a lot of them have heavy periods. And so, especially ferritin is often not
Hmm.
spoken over, like it's like your iron stores. And sometimes
Yep.
that can be low without you actually being anemic on paper. And so, it's good to get that above 30 ideally. I found quite a bit of vitamin B12 and D deficiency in
Hmm.
women in particular, but I mean, in women for sure, and younger women too. And I think part of that might be some eating a lot of vegan diets, which I'm not against, but you do have to be aware of the fact that you need to get B12, and it primarily comes from animal products. And then D, I think is a really underrated vitamin because um, we sort of just well, it often doesn't get tested, and then we sort of think like, oh, it's just for bones, but it actually is really, really important for brain health, heart health, supporting your immune system, has an anti-colon, like an answer, anti-GI, um, cancer benefit. And so it's very just anti-inflammatory. So that's one that I think you can get a lot of bang for your buck, knowing the level and then getting it more elevated. Um, Thyroid, did I mention thyroid? That's one of the
Mm-mm.
first things that comes up in your sort of can come up in your 20s and 30s is thyroid issues. And so, and that can certainly play into your hormones and be a cause of irregular periods and stuff. So, thyroid is definitely important. Um,
So speaking of the thyroid panel, are you a proponent of getting your TSH, T4, T3, getting, those 8 biometrics that come along in that panel? Because so many doctors just order the TSH and the
I know.
T4.
So I am, but I will say with a caveat that I kind of, I know that if I see like T3 and, and T4 low, like I will recommend some supplements in terms of like easy stuff like, okay, increasing selenium might help. And you can get that from Brazil nuts and little things like that. But if at that point, and that's helped with some cases, but if it doesn't, then I actually will send them to a functional medicine doctor or a nutritionist if they want to go that route.
Yeah.
So I do think a lot of times there are traditional Western doctors, and this is good, for a lot of young women to know and think about that, traditional medicine is great, and I'm the biggest advocate of science and everything. But I do think a lot there's still so much of a lack of knowledge with especially like autoimmune diseases that a lot of young women suffer. And by the way, are connected with like premature ovarian failure and like early menopause because if you think about it, if you have sort of a hyperactive immune system, that immune system sometimes attacks your like ovarian tissue. And so often they go hand in hand. But a lot of women, they have these sort of autoimmune issues and they're kind of dismissed in the traditional healthcare system.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of functional medicine doctors have been, not all, but a lot have been ahead of the game with autoimmune stuff. I mean, they were the ones talking about, leaky gut or gut dysbiosis like decades ago. And I remember in medical school when I went, it wasn't a thing. It was like,
Right.
oh, that's just like really, Wild West medicine. And they were right, like leaky gut. And now everyone's, talking about gut microbiome. So I sort of think if you're not getting answers, you're not getting better through the traditional healthcare system, sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box with like a nutritionist or functional medicine or a naturopath. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What about looking at your sex hormones, your estradiol, your progesterone, and your testosterone? Is it in your 20s? Do you need to look at it? Is it in your 30s? If you're on birth control, is it pointless to look at it?
If
At
you're
what
on
point? Yeah.
if you're on birth control, it's pretty much pointless to look at it because everything's going to be low because that's all been suppressed.
Hmm.
Um, and we're testing for the beta estradiol, not like the ethanol estradiol. There's not a lab test for that. So everything's going to be low. Progesterone is going to be 0. Your testosterone is going to be low, and that's not artificial, but your sex hormone binding globulin is going to be high, and that's just the pattern that happens on a birth control pill. And then if you're not on a birth control pill, you just have to, they're definite. I would say if you're having regular periods and you're not having issues, I don't think you need to test for those things. And but if you do, it's important to know that you have to know where you are in your cycle because it can look normal and be abnormal, or it can be abnormal and look normal if you're not taking this cycle into context of where she is in her menstrual cycle. Um, but if she is going months without a period, then it is important to send. And so you do want to send a pregnancy test, you want to send follicle stimulating hormone, you want to send estradiol. Luteinizing hormone can sometimes help give us insight as to whether there's more PCOS, and testosterone, total testosterone, free testosterone as well. So and DHEA. So yes, I think if there's period abnormalities going on, then I do think it's good to send. And honestly, there's I don't know why sometimes OBGYNs are such gatekeepers with labs. Like in the end, even if like I think it's better to just I'd rather have them and then be like, okay, maybe they're not going to change my clinical management, but I'd rather have them than like miss something, or I just think sometimes there's this weird like the only thing that what I also worry about is OBGYN sending a panel, it looking normal on paper, and then using that to like dismiss a patient and saying like,
Hmm.
oh,
Hmm.
well, your labs are normal, so you're fine. And that can happen a lot. So,
Absolutely.
but I think overall it's better to have more information if you're dealing with something and not getting answers. And you have every right, women have every right to demand getting blood work done, and having those levels on paper is good because you can always take those to get second opinions.
Well, I would say if it's a big fight and it's a barrier, then perhaps you just have to find a new physician
Yeah.
to work with.
Yeah. But I hear
Yeah.
that so often. I'm like, why is it such a thing
Yeah.
that
It is a thing.
why are the doctors not
Yeah.
sending labs? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't get it. We don't get paid. It's not like there's any financial reason to send or not send. Like, it's no, I don't, anyway.
Yeah. You mentioned before that as women move into their 30s, closer to their 40s, sometimes women who are on birth control will have those breakthrough perimenopausal symptoms. But what about for the woman who is on birth control, who doesn't have those breakthrough symptoms? How does she know she's in perimenopause?
That's a good question. I mean, the only really way to know is basically to get off if she's not having any symptoms, then the only way to really know is to get off the pill and then see if those symptoms present. We don't really have sophisticated enough blood testing now to determine that. Like you could send an estradiol level after someone's off the birth control pill for a couple months, and one day it might be very high, one day might be low because that is what's happening. Estrogen's up and down and all around. So, um, I would generally say, for that situation, I go based on clinical symptoms and how they're feeling. I can pretty much tell if someone's going. I mean, look, we all go through perimenopause that, at some point, if whether you've had symptoms or not, once you've gone a 1 year without your period, you've gone through perimenopause. But, you know, how do we know if before that point, if someone's in perimenopause? It comes down to a clinical diagnosis and like ruling out the other stuff with lab work and then taking into account the symptoms. And then ultimately, you kind of diagnose it backwards. If you give them hormone therapy and they're better, then it confirms it was perimenopause. But we don't have like a good perimenopause lab yet.
And let's say for example, this woman who's in her 30s, now her 40s, now in her 50s is still on birth control. She's just sort of like cruising through and she's asking herself, wow, there's all this information out there. Should
Yeah.
I be on menopause hormone therapy? Should I get off my birth control? Um a lot of women like that aren't having a period at that point, but their doctor just hasn't said anything to them. So it's sort of
Mhm.
just, they've just sort of been coasting through this phase in their life. Now, what do they do?
I think personally, like if, I mean, and I don't, so I would say I'm a big believer in bioidentical hormone therapy. So I would personally have more of a preference. Like if it was my daughter or if it's me, I would prefer to be on that because I think the data is more supportive of that being better for your long-term health in terms of
Hmm.
cognitive function, Alzheimer's, um, cardiovascular disease. Certainly better for bone and cardiovascular disease than birth control pill. And we don't really know with dementia because no one's studying, women aren't on birth control pills when they're 60 and 70. So
Right.
it's hard, we don't really know. But I would say based on the other things that I'm of the opinion, and that's not an FD, that's not like a guide, that's not like an OBGYN guideline by the Menopause Society or the American College of OBGYNs, but I personally think it would be better to transition to hormone therapy.
Yeah. Let's shift to pillars of health and how this premenopausal woman can really hone in on her lifestyle interventions, setting herself up for longevity, for success, for when she does go through the transition of menopause. She's got
Yeah,
this really strong foundation.
yeah.
So, first up is obviously nutrition. We
Yes,
all have to eat.
yes.
So, what are the key, and you have a certification in lifestyle medicine, which is so awesome that you're an
Oh, thanks.
OBGYN with that. It's such a bonus because it's
Oh,
really frustrating for women to go to their doctors and have to leave the office and say, well, he or she said to eat better, but I have
I
no
have no idea.
idea. I mean, that's
Yeah,
where health coaches come into play. We
yeah.
bridge that gap, right? But you
We
you are,
should, as
but
doctors, we should have a knowledge that we have to have
yes.
basic knowledge on
Yeah,
that. And they don't teach it. Maybe it's different now, but when I was in medical school, they really didn't focus on nutrition at all, which is so ridiculous because it's so important.
yeah.
Yeah, so with nutrition, I will also say there's definitely general um, like guidelines in terms of and simple things but there's also nuances for what, if someone has more insulin resistance or not. But let's start with like the basics, which are, fiber is crucial, and vegetables have a ton of nutrients that you just don't get if you don't eat the vegetables. And so even, when my mom would tell me like, eat your I always knew like you're supposed to eat vegetables, but one is that it doesn't have to be like boring, sad vegetables. I mean, the difference between like a sad salad and like an amazing nutrient-rich
Mhm.
salad with like so many different types of like, herbs and seasonings and amazing, a homemade dressing and lots of healthy fats and nuts, like can be, I mean, so different. It's like, I, so not all salads are created equally, but
Mhm.
the point is like, the more color and variety, it not only adds to the taste and enjoyment, but I was so blown away when I was studying lifestyle medicine at the incredible power of food and the antioxidants in these vegetables and berries that literally change like the health of at the cells, the level of your cells. I mean, it's really incredible how the food you eat can change how you feel, how you sleep, like it's really amazing. And
Mhm.
I felt like if I knew that earlier in my 20s, maybe I would have been more motivated. But it was just like, just eat your veggies. It's like, oh. And now the more I read, I'm like, wow, like you get all these amazing polyphenols, you get all these amazing um, really potent antioxidants from the different colors. So the different colors represent a different variety, and most of them have a lot of varieties in them. So you're really losing out on amazing nutrients for your brain if you are not eating them. And one of this great book by Lisa Mosconi, do you follow
Mhm.
her? Yeah, like is I know she has menopause brain, but I think it's XX Brain, which talks about
Mhm.
sort of the importance of nutrition with long-term brain health, and it's pretty cool. And then I find that a lot of young women tend to shy away from the fats because I don't know if it's sort of, hopefully that's changing with the shift of being skinny to strong, but I find that sometimes what they're missing in their diet is like avocados, nuts, olive oil, and being a little too restrictive with that. There's a big difference between saturated fat and unsaturated
Mhm.
fat, and in my opinion, you really can't overdo it with like avocados. Avocados and like olive oil. Avocados have a lot of fiber in them, which is really helpful for heart
Yep.
health, gut health. There's all this. I like GLP-1s. I believe they're good medicines, but you can naturally stimulate your own GLP-1 production by increasing fiber, which helps the gut
Mm.
microbiome produce more short chain fatty acids, which then
Yep.
produce more GLP-1. So there's really like food is really powerful. So healthy fats, colorful veggies, which will give you those antioxidants, but also a lot of fiber, which is good for many different things. And then of course protein. We're all trying to
Mhm.
increase our protein intake. So trying to focus on like incorporating more benefit as opposed to being restrictive. And the other, like, these are such simple things, but you know, one of the things we learn in lifestyle medicine too is like the order in which you eat food can really matter. So trying to what we want to avoid are these big insulin glucose spikes and crashes and insulin, spikes. And so eating the protein, the veggies, the healthy fats first, if you're going to have the french fries or the pasta, eat it as the last thing on your plate.
Right.
That really sort of can help stabilize it. This isn't like rocket science that's going to change something in 1 or 2 days, but these little habits, when you
Yep.
start doing them earlier, like I wasn't doing this before I did my lifestyle medicine stuff. Now it's just routine. And my weight is more manageable because I think I've implemented these habits. If I had been doing that earlier in my 20s, I probably would have had healthier pregnancies. Like I was so surprised because I was one of these people who could always eat whatever she wanted, didn't have a hard time losing weight. And then when I got pregnant, which oftentimes pregnancy puts a strain on your body that then sort of the underlying issues kind of manifest themselves, whether it be high blood pressure but I had really terrible gestational diabetes. I had
Mm.
required insulin. I had to, check my sugars 4 times a day. I had to inject myself with a lot of insulin. I felt awful. I couldn't slow down the weight gain. I mean, it was really embarrassing as an OBGYN. And I was always empathetic for my patients who couldn't slow the weight gain in pregnancy, but I was like, it is definitely not a calories in, calories out situation.
Yeah,
Like it's not. It's so more complex than that. So anyway, what you do in your 20s can really help with what happens in your pregnancies.
absolutely. Yeah, I think those are all really good tips and advice that are all science backed and evidence based as well. Moving into sleep and recovery, how important is nailing that in your 20s and 30s in preparation for the menopause transition?
My God, sleep is so crucial. Like the what your brain does during when you sleep is incredible. And I feel like if I had implemented all those things in my 20s, I could probably live to like 100, you know. I wish kind of like you were saying, I wish I had incorporated these things
Yeah.
earlier. Um, Sleep is important because it changes our hormones. It's really impossible to lose weight if you're not sleeping. It's directly linked to mental resilience, of course. Your brain actually, like, your brain filters out toxins that are accumulated during the day at night. I mean, it's really incredible. And, you know, sleeping at a it's hard, I know, because like we were talking, that's the demographic, and I get it. I was there too, to where they go hard, but you know, I trying to sleep at generally closer to the same time every night.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, with social media is great and modern technology and everything is great, but I do think there's a lot more sleep issues with young kids
Yeah.
because they are staying up on their phone or their iPad so late. And that can really, it does can affect your melatonin secretion. When you look at something, again, I always like knowing why we're not supposed to or why we should be doing things instead of just telling people like don't look at your phone because of
Mhm.
blue light. Okay, whatever. But when I read also learning about sleep and lifestyle medicine, when you look at something with blue light, it sends a signal to through your eyes to the pineal gland of your
Mhm.
brain that it's time to be awake and alert, and it inhibits the secretion of melatonin.
Mhm.
So your circadian rhythm gets all off. And I was like, wow, like if I know this is having these downstream effects on my hormone melatonin, why, like, I get it. I don't want to be looking at my blue light. Not to mention that usually what we're looking at is kind of stimulatory and like, you know, looking at, you know, whatever news or it's something that can not be relaxing.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting the sleep thing down is crucial. And these simple habits of like, I don't know, we haven't really talked about stress management, but sleep and stress management literally can add years to your life, literally.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this stress management. I think this is a great topic for young people because they are dealing with so much more stress in the world than you and I were back in that time.
Totally.
From cultural issues, political issues, getting a job. I know a slew of kids out of college right now who just can't find jobs and how stressful that is for them. Um, Relationships, meeting people online.
Yes. Oh my
Uh,
gosh, the dating apps, so hard.
yeah, it's all really,
It's so hard.
yeah,
I know, I feel for, sorry, I'm just gonna I'm gonna lean
yeah.
back my computer a little bit. I feel for these young girls because it's so much harder to date than when we were dating, and the social media pressures, of course, which we're all kind of vulnerable to, but I think, yeah, it's a lot. So I see so many young women that are stressed and have so much pressure on them. And I think realizing, you know, you're never going to remove that, like there's never, it's not realistic to like, okay, don't be stressed or just
Right.
sort of you're going to get rid of the stress. The stress is only going to be there. So figuring out what are the things that help you manage stress. And, you know, of course, I think a lot of people obviously know exercise
Hmm.
can really be helpful in this. Um, Science shows that walking outside and actually seeing the color green, like getting out there, seeing the green. I love it. You have plants in your office.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also that's why I like working in here because I'm surrounded
Hmm.
by green. But it does help, man. It literally can lower your cortisol level. They've done studies on this and being outside seeing green. Um, I think social connection is often undervalued, and the, you know, good and bad, like the relationships. This is good for all of us to be aware, and we kind of know it intuitively, but the people that make you laugh and fill your cup, like, are good for your health, literally. Like, your friends influence your health. Hanging out more with people who have the same goals and who do prioritize their health.
Mm-hmm.
You're we have these things called, the social determinants of your health. Like, your
Mm-hmm.
health is very influenced by who you hang out with, where you put your time and effort in. I mean, we all kind of know that. But I do think the earlier you can learn the techniques to help, and of course, things like yoga and meditation are all backed by science. I have the hardest time meditating, I'll be honest. I
I
know
do too.
you
I
just
don't, yeah, I
I
don't
will
do it.
say it because and I will be transparent with my patient. I'll be like,
Yeah.
"Look, there's so much data, and every time I go to these medical conferences on longevity, I'm like, wow, it's so compelling, so compelling, and then I can't do it. So
Yeah.
I've been trying it with my kids, and so what we've been doing at night now is some meditating, and we sit like crisscross applesauce, and we try to count like backwards, and we sort of do that, and we breathe, and they've grown to really like it. Where like my 3-year-old's like, "Mommy, are we gonna meditate? I want to meditate." And so I think they like it. I think it does calm them down. Where my bedtime can be complete like chaotic like mess.
Yeah. Yeah, managing or mindfulness and meditation are two different things. And
Yeah,
so I decided, okay, meditation is not for me. There's
yeah,
just a barrier to entry and I just can't get into it. But
I know.
mindfulness is something very different and I do think
Yeah,
the barrier to entry is a lot lower. And so mindfulness for me and that has worked for my kids too is just go we have dogs, so we have to
yeah,
go for multiple walks every
yeah.
day. I'm in downtown Chicago and live along the lake, so I can get out in the
Nice.
greenery and then the water. So to me, it's more environmental and getting out there and just having the quiet in my mind. And that's
Yeah,
helped me. I've tried to build a mindfulness practice. It's mindfulness has also helped me with the menopause transition
yeah.
when I've had hair loss issues for 27 years. I've had thyroid issues for
Mhm,
27 years,
mhm,
weight fluctuations, mood, divorce. Like these are things,
mhm.
we're talking to the premenopausal woman, but this is all lying ahead of them.
Yeah,
And they need to know what's coming and what's going to be in their toolkit. And mindfulness is one of those things, even for sexual pleasure, which a
yeah.
lot of young women
That's
do
such a good point.
struggle with.
Mhm.
Mindfulness is a way to really help ease that struggle as well.
Yes, that's such a good point. I
Yeah.
think that becomes huge, and that's often the missing link when libido issues arise. And, like, I'm a big proponent of supplementing testosterone for women and things like that, but
Hmm.
there is this other component that testosterone and FDA medications are not going to necessarily they're not gonna address, like, this mindfulness, because it's very difficult to be present
Yes.
and be in that and enjoy pleasure when you're in, like, a fight or flight state all the time.
Right.
So, learning to be present and mindfulness is very much correlated with libido and sexual health.
Yeah. And there are some amazing books out there for young people to read, which I'll put in the show notes. And also, there are amazing resources if you are really stressed out or depressed or have
Yeah.
anxiety. Now we could talk about building your healthcare team. Perhaps there's a therapist needed, a psychiatrist, a sex therapist. There's all different types of therapists, trauma.
Yeah.
So there are resources out there.
And now with telehealth, back when I was in my 20s, there wasn't the option to have telehealth or apps. There's an app called Stellar Sleep. I have nothing to do with them, but they do
Mhm.
like just simple CBT,
Yeah.
cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia because I had dealt with that for a little bit. But so there's great, it does take the effort of like research, like looking and trying different things, but I think there's a lot more options at the risk of almost being overwhelmed by all the options. But there's certainly a lot more options than when we were growing up in terms of how to make therapy, accessible and
Hmm.
easy, and you can do it from your house. You don't have to like go and do it in person unless you want to, of course. But
Right.
I think therapy is huge, and you know, um, I think there's less of a stigma with mental. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? Because you have daughters that are different than my age kids, so I sort of feel like I see a lot, most. I mean, all of me, my friends, all of us, we all have therapists. But Is there still a stigma with that in with younger girls?
No, no, not at
No,
all. I,
right?
I have I have one daughter, and no, her and her friends, if they need to go talk to someone,
Good. That's
it
what I
could be
thought.
it could be a mindfulness coach, it could
Yeah,
be a life
exactly.
coach, it could be a health
Exactly.
coach, it could
Just a
be
coach.
a
Yeah,
therapist, it could be a licensed
exactly.
practitioner. So there's all different pathways to go down, and
Exactly.
in fact, I think people are more. Not just more open to it, but supporting their friends and family
I think that's
around
great.
getting the
Yeah.
help, right?
That's excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought
Yeah.
too. Good. So yeah, exactly. So I really think whether you a therapist or a coach or whoever it is, like we always need someone who can give us some sort of strategies and tools with how to
Mhm.
manage life because it does get kind of harder and more complex.
Yeah.
You know, having an OBGYN and, you know, while we don't do pap smears until 21, the visit is so much more than a pap smear. I think it's important for women to know that we really want you and your pediatrician wants you to be established care with someone after you're 18, even maybe earlier, even if you're not needing any physical exam, even if you're not needing a pap smear, it's just good to check in, do blood work regularly, talk about sex, talk about, hormones, talk about the more a doctor gets to know you, the more they know your baseline is and when something is off. Um,
Mhm.
I think it's really good to establish a relationship with an OBGYN as early as possible, even if you're not having issues, you don't need to wait
Absolutely.
till issues to come up. Just, same thing with, again, for the same idea, primary care. Um, Doctor, just because the more they get to know you, the more they can be insightful when something, needs to be addressed. And it's always better to sort of have a team there instead of trying to build the team when there's an issue. And of course, look, new
Yes.
issues arise and sometimes you need providers that aren't the basic, more primary care doctors. Sometimes you need a neurologist or
Right.
whatever. But I think the basic healthcare team would be like an OBGYN, a family medicine or primary care person, a therapist, and a dentist.
Yep.
It's all connected. Our dental health, is related to hormones
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the gut microbiome, but we have an oral microbiome that
Yeah,
affects our gut microbiome
exactly.
as well.
Exactly.
Wow, Dr. Robbins, what a great conversation. We could go on and do part two of this conversation, and maybe
Yes.
we will.
Yes.
But basically, I think the gist is, in summary, that all the things we talked about are going to come up in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. So the earlier you can accept that there's going to be changes going on hormonally, emotionally, physically, socially, and the more prepared you can be into the entry of this menopause transition, the stronger and better that foundation is going to be to help you move through it.
100%. And what you do in your 20s will absolutely impact how you feel in your 50s, 60s, and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah.
Like it is, you are laying a foundation and like you said, chronic disease starts in your 20s.
Yeah.
100%. I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you
I
so
will
much,
put all
Rachel.
of the
To
places
tell
to
you.
find you
Thank you.
in the
Yes.
show notes. It's called The Elm. It's in,
Yes. And if anyone wants to follow me, I do most of my teaching and stuff on Instagram at Alicia Robbins, MD.
yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. And everyone,
Thank
thank you so much
you.
for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Lifestyle changes can be hard and overwhelming to make. By building your support team of functional medicine doctors, therapists, and health coaches, you can reach your optimal health goals. Be sure to check out my other podcasts. Until we meet again, stay healthy.